Okay. Well, welcome to our show, and I am here with the incomparable and a good friend of mine, Jason Mankey. How you doing today, Jason?
I'm great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm sorry I missed you on your 13 event whirlwind tour this year.
It was a little nuts, that's for sure. I'm never going to do that many events again in a year.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I'll probably see you at a few of them next year. I bugged out this year. I just didn't do any events myself, but anyway, for those of our viewers who don't know you, though I can't imagine that's too many, tell us a little bit about you and your spiritual path and things that are going on.
Hate talking about myself, but I'll give it a go. I've been practicing witchcraft for, wow, it makes me feel so old when I do the math in my head. 20, 20, no, like almost 30 years. I turned 50 this year, and I started when I was
Wow.
21, so it's been almost 30 years. First, I was into sort of eclectic Wicca, and then I kind of found my heart drawn to more initiatory forms of Wiccan witchcraft. And even if it's not initiatory, I like to use that language, I summon, stir, and call you up and, sound pretentious while I'm doing ritual.
Hmm.
But that's been the focus of my life for the last 20 years. Started writing books back in 2016. My ninth book was released in December of last year, called Modern Witchcraft with the Greek Gods, that I co-wrote with Estrella Taylor, who's also a really great writer. And I live in California, where I have two covens, a Gardnerian one and an eclectic one.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to you having a year off, and who knows, maybe you'll write 3 or 4 books during the year. We never know, right?
Cool. Maybe we'll see.
So, being someone that's been in the craft for as long as you have, you've seen a lot of changes. Um, what do you think of the state of the craft today, and where do you think it might be going?
We are in a really odd stage in the witchcraft world right now. I'm very convinced that there's sort of like two parallel lines of witchcraft sort of happening simultaneously. Though there's the one that you and I know pretty well, part of the broader pagan community, outdoor festivals in a lot of places, people who know who Oberon Zell is, perhaps, who know who Starhawk is, a long history of that. And then there's sort of this other one, which is really influenced by influencer and wellness cultures and things. And these are people who are reading different authors than a lot of us, who are not as aware of things in the past as maybe you and I are, and probably everybody watching this show. And they're also often paying large amounts of money for retreats and workshops, the kind of money that I would feel very uncomfortable charging somebody. I mean, I think that they're both legitimate forms of witchcraft, though. I'm not here to mock anybody's path, right? I mean, as long as it empowers you, makes you feel better, I think that's important. I think that's great. We're also seeing the word witchcraft sort of uncoupled from religious identity. So right now I'm writing a book about Raymond Buckland, and Buckland was always very adamant. Witchcraft is a religion. Witchcraft is a religion. That's what I'm doing. And now if you say witchcraft is a religion, people get mad at you. Like, there's no way what I'm doing is a religion, and it seems to sort of be divorced from that. And the word magic is used, or witch is used more and more, just to sort of mean magic user, which is a real different thing than what I grew up with in the '90s and early odds. It's a big change.
Yeah, it really is. And then, if we look at like on TikTok, and we have the you have a lot of the short this is a spell for this is a spell for that, and these individuals are really completely separate from, like you said, separate of what we do. And do you think that the two paths will ever merge, or do you think that one will die out? I mean, where do you think we're going?
That's a really great question, because I don't know. Every once in a while, you see some overlap, right? And it feels like in the last 4 or 5 years, people have sort of been feeling each other out on both of these sides. And so there is a little bit of overlap, but a lot of times there just isn't, and maybe you feel uncomfortable in one space and more comfortable in the other. I think that we don't always all have to hang out, and it's okay. And I think a rising tide lifts all boats. Maybe people who are a part of that different witchcraft culture than maybe you and I are, they're still going to stumble on things that we do, and I think that's okay. And maybe they'll be a part of it, maybe they won't. But I think we've always sort of lived that way, for a long time. The people who were initiated witches didn't talk to uninitiated witches. There's always been different kinds of paganisms. I think that's a part of our culture and things. And so this isn't that radical of a departure, but every once in a while you'll talk to somebody, I want to be a witch. And then, like, who have you read? And they name all these people none of us have ever heard of, but are very important to them, right? And and that's valid.
Hmm. I think we're onto something there. And what's interesting is that I'm curious on your take on the overlaps, because like you said, a lot of times that they kind of do overlap for a little while, but you have this like when you hear the word religion, and then you have this other half that are like, oh well, these guys just don't know what they're doing because they're not initiatory. How important do you think this initiatory process is, and are we going to keep going? You know.
Most witches aren't initiated into anything other than maybe
Mhm.
witchcraft as a general whole. I mean, I think that initiatory traditions will survive because I think for some people that is a draw, being a part of an established tradition that has a history, and there's an energy that you tap into when you're an established tradition. But I think for most people, they've done eclectic things, and I think most witches today are most certainly solitaries, right? And so one of the reasons for influencer culture is because people are looking for a community without having to be in a flesh and blood community, right? So I can follow
Mhm.
all these people, I can learn about witchcraft, I can talk to other people about witchcraft, but I don't have to go to somebody's house, or I don't have to go to a UU church or anything else, right? I can just have it sort of on my own terms.
Mhm. And do you think that COVID had an impact on that?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I've been to a lot of events. A lot of them haven't recovered yet from being on pause. I mean, obviously everything after February of 2020 was on pause, but there were groups that didn't do anything in 2021, which makes sense. There were groups who still didn't do things in 2022 because they would see the spikes and then decide to cancel events. So, as with anything, if you do it a lot and you go and you're used to it, you'll keep doing it. But once you stop doing something, it's really hard to pick it back up. And I think that we've seen that with COVID, people who were a part of groups sort of leaving groups. I will say over the last 6 months, though, I've kind of seen more and more people kind of coming back to things. But that takes time. It takes a while. It doesn't all just happen at once.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah, so I'm kind of wanting to go in a certain direction here. I have a question. I just have to formulate it the right way. Um
be kind.
I
Be
try.
kind.
I really try, Jason. Um hmm. So there's a large body of initiatory people who say that anything that's not initiatory is invalid. Now, we know that that's been going on for a long time. And the more and more people that I talk to who are not initiated but have this it almost feels, and I hate the term, but it's like spirit filled kind of witchcraft, is that they get touched by something and then they follow it. So, within initiatory paths, we talk a lot about we have deific structures, and a lot of times with with those that are not initiated, there's not a lot of talk about the influence of deity within our structure. Now, like your latest book, with witchcraft with the Greek gods, and working with Estrella Taylor, who I also know, who she's a lovely lady. That Where do you think what's happening with this whole idea that we need to have some kind of deific attachment to what we're doing, that we have to honor the gods? I mean, we know from initiatory path, we talk about that a lot. But what about from a non-initiatory pursuit of these new guys as such?
I mean, I think witchcraft as to define witchcraft, it's always been pretty nebulous, right? I
Oh
mean, for
yeah.
a long time, witchcraft probably meant magic user, bad, most likely a woman, right? And now it's
Mm-hmm.
used as a term for female empowerment. It's used by some of us maybe as a way to signify their spiritual choice or religion, and for some people, it just sort of means, oh, I do magic, so that makes me a witch. I think there's always been atheist witches or witches not, who don't care about deity or who are uninvolved with deity. And I think that's fine. You get out of it what you get out of it and what you put into it. I will say though that there is sort of this other deity thing that's going on though. I mean, if we've seen the Hecate stuff ramp up, I mean that's huge, right? When people identify as a Hecatean witch, I've never
Hmm.
met anyone who said, I'm a Hermian witch, right? For Hermes, right? So there's this groundswell of people who are really interested in deity. It's just often one particular deity. Though I will say, and maybe this will get me in trouble, but I always found it really funny when people would say to me, I'm not spiritual or religious, and I'm a Hecatean witch. And I'd be like, you're making a deity like the center of your practice. To me, that would scream at least being spiritual, if not religious.
Hmm. So what about this whole thing? What do what is your take on? Well, first of all, why don't we just sit here and between us try to come up with an actual definition of magic? I mean, that is an insane thing, I think, in and of itself. But how would we define magic?
I mean, to me, magic is using natural energies and natural powers to have some control over your life and what's going on. Right? That's what most of us use magic for. We use magic
Okay.
to get a job, pay for a car. We're utilizing natural forces, and we are trying to manifest what we want through those natural forces.
Okay. And I would agree with that. So what about the concept of service within magic? I mean, service to your community, being involved in social justice. I mean, all of these things.
I think magic reinforces all of those things. So
Okay.
I remember I was arguing with an atheist pagan friend of mine, and he's like, magic isn't real. Why would you even bother wasting your time? Especially because it was like, I think we were trying to do magic to freeze Brett Kavanaugh off of the Supreme Court. And we came close. I think we came close. And I was like, well, first of all, I believe magic's real, and I've seen results from it in my own life. But secondly, if it's not real, doing a spell to do something specific for social justice is going to galvanize you to do other things, right? You're not just going to do the one thing. It's going to be something that's always on your mind. It's going to cross your mind, maybe to give money to organizations or give time to organizations. So I think magic really influences sort of what we do in those other spheres. A spell is not just something you do once and then walk away. A spell is something you carry with you going forward, and it influences your decisions, it influences your actions. And I think often it makes you take action because it's always with you and around you.
Hmm. Okay. So then in that case, almost sounds like what we're talking about here. It reminds me of how we define quantum physics. In our group, we do a particular ritual where we generate the friction. We have a Diacetyl and a Wittershins circle, and we create this energy vortex between them to feel that. But we talk about it from a quantum physics perspective, from a physics perspective. So if magic is part of the natural world, then where does all this other stuff fit? It's like, you said that we can do magic without being involved with deific structures, and that sometimes we have deity, sometimes we don't. But yet we're still affecting the natural world in everything that we do. Would you say that's true?
I mean, we affect the natural world in everything that we do, but I mean, it's not like if you have a stone, right? And we think that stones do certain things, they emit certain energies, which perhaps might make it more probable that something is going to come to you. To me, that's not really related to deity anymore. It's just realizing what the energy of that particular thing is. I'm also not a physics person at all. I was a
That's
religious
why I
studies
hesitated to talk about it.
I was a religious studies major in college. So, that is sort of I'm the more poetic soul. How's that? Like, I'm very poetic in my way. But I don't I love deity. Deity is really central to my practice. If I was to boil everything down to it, I think, magic and deity more than anything else really define my witchcraft practice. But that's just me, and I don't think it has to be everybody else, right? And I think that's okay. I do think if you're going to work with people, You should probably work with people who are sympathetic and compatible to the things that you believe in. Having a bunch of atheists in the coven when the rest of us all believe in the gods would be problematic. I think that there would be some energy issues there. But I've met some nice witches and pagans over the years who just don't really have a lot of time for deities or see them in very abstract ways. Like the horn god isn't a figure so much as the wild energy of nature, right? Or the mother goddess is sort of the embrace of the earth around us, not a conscious entity, but an energy and a feeling.
Okay. And so, again, and I am a physics person, a bit. So energy just is, it's neither, it has polarity. You know where I'm going with this. It has polarity. So, but it can be either or, and it's everything. So we've seen a recent upsurge in gender fluidity.
Mhm.
And within the craft, particularly initiatory paths, some conversations I've had recently, it seems that there is some pushback on the concept of the craft being non-dual, that we don't utilize that duality so much as, because we come back to the priestess who can strap on the sword and be and channel the god. So then what, where does gender fluidity fall in all this for you?
I mean, I think that saying characteristics are masculine or feminine is lazy. I've met
Yeah.
thousands of people, and people encompass a whole range of things. My own relationship with my wife is quite untraditional in that she does most of the traditional man things while I do most of the traditional woman things. So all those categories to me are silly, right? I care about how people see themselves and identify. And how people identify doesn't hurt me at all, right? I love
Mm-hmm.
everybody. There's room for everybody in the circle. I know that there have been some people in certain communities who have not been particularly trans inclusive, and that makes me very, very sad because
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that's really what the craft is. I don't really think that's a part of our history. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's a place for everybody, and I've never encountered anyone that I didn't think could find a place in the craft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you feel that there is a core of material that witches really should have under their belt in order to actually practice?
No, I mean, I think they should just sort of know themselves and what they want out of it. I mean, why do you call yourself a witch? What are you getting out of witchcraft? How does witchcraft further you as a good human being? How does witchcraft impact your life? Those are the questions I think that people need to ask themselves. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to wear black all the time because it makes you feel cool? Then that's not really a reason to do it. Does it empower you? Does it make you feel better about yourself? Does it improve your circumstances? Those are the things. My wife doesn't read any witchcraft books. She read like four when she was 17. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was done. Then she met me and she goes, if I ever need to read anything again, you will read it for me. It will be fine. And I really believe that's fine. I mean, witchcraft is about the doing. It's about doing things, right? And we learn to do things through trial and error. Certainly, I think books are great. I write books. I love books. There's information in books, and books help you to do things. But I mean, they're also not the only thing. I mean, it's about doing the witchcraft. I think more than anything else.
So it's about the doing and about self-empowerment is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. Why else would you be a witch? If it made you miserable, why would you do it? I mean, I guess there are Christian denominations that love to be miserable and everything is terrible. But I don't really see that in the witchcraft community a whole lot.
Tiny, oh dear. I know that we've had conversation years ago when we were together. I was originally baptized Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, and we call it the Misery Synod. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of glad I ran away from it. But anyway, um, So yeah, I mean, why would you do anything that makes you miserable? Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your Greek gods book, because it's kind of like we've gone around. You have we have Celtic structures, we've had Greek structures, and the Greek structures were first, and then it's kind of been this resurgence of Greek structures. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your work with the Greek gods in your last and that book.
I fell in love with the Greek gods, I think, in second grade. I read like a little mythology book, the kind that you get in your classroom library. And I read it and I was enchanted. I said the names of the gods wrong. I called Persephone Persephone for a very, very long time. But I fell in love immediately. There was something about them. And I remember a cold day in February. I lived in Illinois, so we didn't celebrate President's Day. We celebrated Lincoln's birthday, and we had
Mm.
that day off from school. And my dad was a single dad, and he would often just leave us at home because back then you could be a feral child even at a very young age. So I remember one day I had no school to go to, and it was cold out and it was very sunny. And I looked up and I said a little prayer to Zeus, because why not say a little prayer to Zeus? So I was enchanted with the gods at an early age. In ninth grade, I made a temple for Aphrodite in art class because I thought, my angsty young self, that if I left offerings in a clay temple for Aphrodite, I would fall in love and have a girlfriend. I did
Mm.
fall in love, did not get a girlfriend out of it because my spell was worded poorly. And so they've been with me ever since, and I wanted to write with them. I write about them. I met Estrella, I think, in 2017, and she was a fiction writer when I met her. But we were talking about writing projects because that's what writers do together. I
Mhm.
think one of us said, "Hey, if we ever write a Greek gods book, I'll write it with you." And so that's what we did. It was 2020, and it was during the pandemic, and we decided, well, we've got lots of time. Maybe this is it. And we wrote this book. This is not a book about Greek Reconstructionism. This is a book about the gods. It's about how they were worshipped in the ancient world. It's about how they're worshipped in the modern world, and it's about working with them. And if you want to
Mm.
work with them like in a Wiccan style circle, we think that's great. If you want to work with them in a traditional witchcraft style circle, we think that's great. If you want to do things in a Greek Reconstructionist way, we also think that's great. But if we look at the history of the gods, some of them weren't even born in Greece because they came from Indo Europeans, which is mostly kind of around the Ukraine in some ways. That's where Zeus is from. Other gods were from other places. They were brought into Greek society. I mean, and the gods are Greek. There's no question about that. But they have like distant tendrils in other places sometimes. And then they spread to Great Britain, to India in the ancient world, right? So they were worshipped lots of different ways for thousands of years. And I would argue in the Renaissance, they were worshipped again in new ways, and witches worship them today. But we wanted to give a love letter to these gods, and that's what we did.
Mm. And what's the name of the book again, Jason? And can you kind of hold it up, let people see it?
Well, let's see. This is Modern Witchcraft with the Greek Gods, history, insights, and magical practice. Each for all the major gods, like the Olympians and other gods that we think of as being very important. Hecate would be an example of one. Persephone. There's a history of the deity, and then there is like what we call personal insights. It's hard to have a relationship with every deity, so we ask people, what's your relationship like with this deity? Would you like to contribute to our book? So people write about their experiences with the gods, and then there are rituals and spells that you can do with the gods. There are hundreds of gods in this book. Not every one god has a giant chapter for themselves, but a lot of them do. The ones that are probably the most well known do. And then, there are others, little bits here and there. And we're just trying to make them knowable and accessible to modern witches and modern pagans who are interested in the gods. I think we don't often think about maybe how the gods were worshipped 2,500 years ago, right? People always go, well, just read the myths. Read the myths. The myths aren't enough. The myths tell one story. And really, myths were all over the board. There was not like just one set of myths in ancient Greece. how gods were interpreted in Athens was different than how they were interpreted in Thebes or Sparta. And also, sometimes the myths make certain gods unlikable. Hera does not come across well in Greek mythology. Hera
Mm-mm.
was loved by the people of Greece, though. The people that worship her loved her, and it's almost like looking at an entirely different goddess. So we thought telling those kind of stories was important.
So awesome. Well, I hope that people will go ahead and get that from you. It sounds very good. Where are you at now? What's going on now? What are you thinking about writing next? Because I know you're not writing nothing because that's not your nature.
I am currently writing a biography of Raymond Buckland, which will be done by the end of this year. And that should be out after that, like in another year. They take a long
Uh-huh.
time, but that's been a project for over a year now. That's been a long project. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Llewellyn's Little Book of Yule because I'm one
Mm-hmm.
of those people who's obsessed with the holiday season. So I'd like to promote that book a lot this time of year and just do a lot of like Yule related crap on all of my social media because it's my favorite
Mm-hmm.
time of year.
Cool. So let's just take a second now that you brought up, how do people get a hold of you? I know you've got a lot of stuff, so maybe just like let people know where the best places to look for you and for some of your conversations, I suppose.
Well, there are 4 Jason Mankeys in the United States. One of them, I think, is a preacher, but I destroy all of them in the Google search. So I'm very easy to find. I kind of feel bad for the other ones, but I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm kind of everywhere. I think I'm still on Twitter, sadly, or whatever it is now. So
Whatever it's called, yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. And I write for Llewellyn, so my books are pretty much, if not everywhere, at least easily accessible everywhere.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we're kind of in this place now that this is a time for what would you say is if you had to give a message out to the public, what would be the message of Jason Mankey to the public right now?
There are no absolutes. That is like one of my rules of witchcraft. If somebody says you have to do it this way, they are probably wrong. The way that you have to do it is the way that makes sense for you and the way that works for you. And we're all a little bit different. And that's okay. Just find what works for you and run with it. And if anybody is ever telling you, there's this only one way, run quickly, run hard, run away.
All right, awesome. Well, Jason, I really appreciate you spending this time with me. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up before we close it down? We have a couple of minutes if you want it.
Um, you know, I've written so many things. I love talking about all of it. I'll tell you too, like during COVID, it was really sad to release books because usually, you release a book, maybe you have a book launch party and all that.
Yep.
You can't. Like no store wanted to do that, right? So it sort of felt like you were shouting into the wilderness during parts of it. And I had a couple of books come out during the pandemic.
Hmm.
That was really sad. One of the last ones that came out in the pandemic was The Horn God of the Witches, which I'm just super proud of. I love The Horn God. There's not ever really been a book really just about the history of the Horn God and horned and antlered gods in general. So very, very proud of that. And it has this beautiful art by Laura Tepes Zakroff on it,
Hmm.
which is just stunning. She's terrific too. You need more filling? I mean, I can go for hours.
Okay. No, we're good. We're good. I appreciate all the time that you're spending with me, and it's been really fun. And hopefully, after the winter, we'll actually get to see each other again. I haven't actually been in the same space for like 3 years, and I look forward to our next conversation.
So do I, my friend. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Goodbye.